Hello everyone. I wanted to do a little video about my blog post about voting. I purposely wanted to write the post in a way that would work for people who are religious or who aren't. But I want to take a little time in this video to talk about the religious components of some of the things I was talking about. As I said, there's definitely been times in my life where I haven't done a good job with a lot of these things I've been talking about. And I found that I didn't feel the Spirit as much. I found that it was difficult for me to hold on to some of my friendships. And I found that I just wasn't as happy, to be honest with you, and certainly not as informed. I often think about Jesus and about the way he lived his life and the things that he taught and how he treated others. And I think those things are extremely important to think about when it comes to the people that we vote for to represent us in our country, when it comes to the policies and platforms and perspectives that we admire and follow and accept rather than challenge. And I think sometimes as Christians, we are incorrect in assuming that in order to be a good disciple of Christ, we have to, in a way, force people to do and believe and take on the perspectives that we have because we believe very strongly that we are correct, and that people just need to do what we say because that's the right thing to do. I know that came across a little bit harsh, but I've seen that so many times as I read a lot of comments and commentary regarding political and social issues on social media. I try to read those things so that I can understand the different perspectives out there and to educate myself. But I find a lot of times I am really disheartened. I think you would perhaps expect as a Christian that the people making some of the most unkind, inflammatory, just closed-minded comments would be the non-religious people. But to be honest, sometimes and oftentimes it is the people who call themselves the most devout Christians that are the most unkind when it comes to political and social issues. And it happens in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as well, which is the church that I'm a part of. There have been several church articles that have come out where there have been either general authorities or other prominent members of the church giving talks about issues that are important for the saints to consider. And some of the comments are just so horrible, accusing, our church leaders of, not being inspired and going the wrong direction and things like that. And that it really is harmful, especially since the articles are so well written with love, written from the lens of trying to be a better disciple of Christ and a better steward of our earth and of our fellow man. And I wonder, how could people be so wrong in the way that they're reacting to these things? And I think one of the biggest issues that I find, and that, was a problem with me in the past, is that a lot of Christians think that there is one supreme political party, and if you are not a part of that political party, then you are not a follower of Christ, that you are not a righteous person, that everything you believe is wrong, that everything that any other party other than their supreme party thinks is important must not be important. And that is such a damaging, extremely damaging point of view. I think, when I was younger, I had some of that. I really thought that there was a party that we were supposed to be a part of as Christians, even though it was never taught. That was never taught. My church is politically neutral. It's always been politically neutral. We've never been told what party to align with. We're just not told that. We've never been told that. But for some reason, culturally, a lot of members of my church and Christians in general believe they have to be part of a certain party, and that if they're not good Christians, and that people who aren't a part of that party are not or cannot possibly be Christians. That is false. It could not be more false. And I had to learn that for myself. As I've seen leaders become more and more corrupt, as I have felt like I didn't know who to vote for because just voting by party lines didn't feel right anymore, and probably never should have felt right. I thought, what am I supposed to do? So I decided to research. I decided to look at the things that were important to the people of the other parties. I decided to research issues that I was confused about or worried about in depth. And I found that it opened my eyes and opened my heart tremendously. And just that type of thinking, that closed-minded thinking, is not the way Christ would want us to be. I mean, he invited people to follow him. He never forced anyone to follow him. So that goes back to the first thing I was talking about, where a lot of times as Christians, we like to, make people believe what we believe and do what we think is right. So Christ never did that. He never forced anyone to be or do or say anything. He just invited them with love and respect. Also, just the unkindness that I was talking about. That's not Christ-like either. Christ taught us not to be contentious. He taught us to be peacemakers. He taught us to love everyone, to love our neighbor, and also to love our enemies, whoever that may be. We're supposed to love everyone. We're supposed to respect people who are different than us. He did. He respected people who were different than him. So these are some of the things. And then as I was talking about this closed-mindedness and trying not to find the truth, God is truth, right? Christ is the epitome of truth. He would want us to do our research, use the brains that he gave us to have well-rounded thoughts and perspectives, rather than just blindly believe things and believe that one side everything must be wicked. Because that's, there are certain things in the gospel that are black and white, but not everything is. And the most important thing that I have found in my life that helps me feel closer to God and more like Christ is the way I think about, talk about, and treat other people, particularly people who are not exactly like me. It isn't, and Jesus, he was friends with people of all backgrounds, people who were not respected. He was friends with them. Some of his disciples were people that no one would have ever chosen had they chosen people based on popularity or how well they were liked. Matthew's an example. He was a tax collector. He was not respected by the Jews, but Christ chose him. And sorry. And I think if we think about that, if we think about that Christ was loving to all people, why aren't we? Why aren't we loving to all people? Why don't we listen to them? Why don't we see their potential? Why don't we see goodness in everyone like Christ does? Why don't we do that? It's just so awful to me, just how hateful Christians can be politically. And I've seen it so many times that, and it's not just Christians, but I'm talking about this from a Christian perspective, so forgive me. And I'm not saying everyone does this. I'm just saying that it happens a lot more than it should. And it's very worrisome. And I think it's certainly Satan trying to pull us apart as a people. And it's working. It's working very, very well. I'm trying to remember where I was. I'm sorry. I haven't scripted this. This is just coming directly from my heart today. But I think I was starting to talk about dehumanization. I see it happen all the time where it's like us versus them, right? And if you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not with us, then you are not worth it. You are not worth my time. You are not worth my consideration or my compassion or my listening or my understanding. And putting people in stereotypical, generalized boxes is convenient because it means we don't have to think about how they feel. We don't have to think about their suffering, but it isn't true, and it isn't fair, and it isn't kind, and it certainly isn't Christ-like. The dehumanization of people is one of the worst things that I see. Whether it's a dehumanization of people from a different party, whether it's the dehumanization of people of different gender identities or sexual orientations, which happens all the time, whether it's people of different perspectives that maybe you don't agree with, you cannot and should not ever dehumanize anyone. One of the most important truths that we know as Christians is that we are all children of God, and He loves us all. He loves us all equally. He wants us all to be happy, And unless we internalize that into our hearts, we will not stop dehumanizing other people. People do not have to think the same way as you do, or believe or do the same things you do to be worthy of love. Everybody is worthy of love. And to deny love, to deny compassion, to deny a listening ear, to deny any of that is wrong. And I'm sorry if that comes across as harsh. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to just tell the truth. And I see this far too often, and to me, it's very scary. And like I said, I used to be guilty of some of these things, and it was really, I think, just coming from a place of ignorance, not necessarily it's not always from a place of malice. And I think a lot of times, these types of damaging perspectives and actions do not come from a place of malice. However, they're still extremely damaging regardless of where they come from. And so it's important for us to open our hearts, open our minds to other possibilities. And just because you've always thought something doesn't mean you're right. I found that from studying the different political parties and what they believe, there's really good perspectives and priorities in every party, not just the two main parties, and all the parties. We may not agree with everything, but there is good in all political parties. There is. And as long as there are people of integrity leading those political parties, who are willing to work across the aisle, which is extremely important and doesn't happen nearly enough, then good will come. And another thing that I see is that a lot of times that we as Christians will be like, well, I'm not going to vote for this person because of something they believe. But they're like really good people. Like they're honest people, they're kind people, they serve their communities. They've done so for a long time. They haven't done anything dishonest or illegal. But just because of the party they're in, you would never vote for them. And in contrast, even if someone is a horrible human being who has done some horrible, illegal, dangerous, or whatever things, that people will still vote for them simply because they align with some of their political beliefs. And that's also very damaging to just be like, because imagine, like really think about that. Like, shouldn't our political leaders be held to a higher standard? It would be great if as Americans, we could all vote for every single issue, but that's not the way our country works. We elect officials who will vote on our behalf for the best interests of the American people. And if we elect people who are power hungry, who are dishonest, who do not care about their fellow man and put party and power above all else, how is that a good idea? It's not. And what I see that is really harmful is when you put party over principle, when you put party over people. I wish we didn't have political parties sometimes, because I think what it does is it causes us to not do our research. It causes us to live in fear. And the media certainly doesn't help with that. I talked a lot in my blog post about the media. You have got to be careful about the media that you choose. And I would suggest that media that calls people names, that is constantly pointing out the bad and never the good, that it withholds important information simply because it doesn't go along with their narrative. And this happens a lot, by the way, in a lot of different media platforms. If you watch or read media like that on purpose, that's not Christ-like media at all. The type of media that is going to help you learn truth, that's going to help you make well-rounded decisions, that's going to help you be a better citizen, which are all Christ-like things, is going to be media that presents the facts, that does not provide opinions, that does not name call, that shows perspectives from all sides and leaves it up to you to decide how you feel. Because that's how Christ operates once again. He doesn't tell you what to think. He doesn't tell you what you have to believe or that you have to come to him. And he doesn't tell you that everyone who's different is a bad person. That's not what Christ taught. So we just have to be so careful that our media choices align with the type of people we want to be as followers of Christ. And if our media choices are causing us to have anger, to have fear, to be intolerant, to be prejudicial, then that media is not serving us and is certainly not serving the American people. We can, in my church, we consider America to be like the promised land, right? And we believe that God will bless us as we keep the commandments. And it's easy to think, oh, we're the Christians, we're keeping the commandments, it's everyone else that's the problem. Nope, not so. We, the Christians, are the problem a lot of times. There is no group of people that's always right. There is no group of people that is always telling the truth. There is no group of people that always is thinking about the welfare of their neighbor. And it doesn't matter what religion you're part of or religion you're not a part of. It doesn't work that way. And you know why? It's because we are all imperfect. It's because we all fall short of the glory of God. Every single one of us, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of we've accepted Christ as our Savior, we still, all of us, are sinners. Every single one of us is a sinner. And that's another problem that I see, is that a lot of times as Christians, we assume that everyone else is the sinner. Everyone else is wicked, and we're the good ones. And everyone should do what we say because we have the truth. We have the light. That doesn't sound very Christ-like to me. And it's very prideful. And pride, leads to all the other sins. And again, as I say all this stuff, it's not everyone that does this. But I just find it to be so much more common than it should be. And, when people wonder why people leave Christianity so much now, well, the things I've been talking about definitely contribute to that. When it comes to policies, guys, when it comes to policies on platforms and laws and all of these things, something else to consider is if it helps one group of people but hurts another, is it good? Is it right? Should we totally embrace it? I would suggest no. I would suggest any type of law or policy that hurts people is not complete, it is not whole, it is not in the best interests of the American people. So anytime you hear opposing viewpoints about something, that means most likely that it is hurting a group of people. And if you're like, but it's helping these people, but if it's hurting another group of people, is it really good? Or is there work to do? Is there work to do? And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to elect people who are willing to work across the aisle, who are willing to collaborate and compromise, and try to help the most people in the best way. Whenever we take our compassion away from one group because we think another group is more deserving, then we're creating a class system in our country. We're saying certain citizens, certain people who live in our country are more important than other people who live in our country. And that is not just, that is not fair, and that is not in alignment with democracy. We believe in equality. We must remember that. We believe in equality in our country. We believe that everyone has the right to happiness in our country. We have got to remember that, and we have got to start thinking with a more compassionate heart and mind. And remember that we oftentimes don't know the whole truth. And it's important and crucial for us to find it. Don't just assume. Don't let the media tell you what to believe. If there is something that you have heard about that sounds so incredibly evil that you could never fathom it, question that thinking. Question if you have all the information. Question if this is just propaganda to get votes. Always question it, because most of the time, the platforms and policies and perspectives of opposing parties have goodness in them. Otherwise, they would not be popular. But when elected officials are more concerned about party than anything else, they are not going to tell the truth. So please question all that negativity. Please question all the contention. Please question any dehumanization. Because number one, it's not Christ-like. And number two, it just doesn't make sense. That is not to say there are not evil people in this world, because there are. And as Christians, it's important for us to find the evil and to denounce it. However, we need to be very careful before we do that. And I think too often do Christians spout that someone is evil, or that an organization is evil, or that an opinion or perspective is evil, without actually knowing all the facts. We are supposed to be righteous in our judgments. We're not supposed to just throw judgments around just because it feels nice, and because it makes us feel better about our perspectives when we can make other people feel like villains. So I hope this helps someone. I personally, as I've learned these things, as I continue to learn, as I continue to be more compassionate, I find that I feel the Spirit so much more strongly in my life. And I feel that the love in my heart towards others has grown exponentially. And I no longer feel pressured to vote for someone simply based on party, simply based on platform. I know that I can vote my conscience as I study and as I compare what the priorities of Christ were and are, and the way he treated people, as I look at those things first and not all the things that I've always been taught or told, that I can make a much better informed decision about everyone that I vote for. Voting is a privilege. Voting is a sacred gift. Not every country in this world has that opportunity. And I think that we need to see it as a sacred gift, and we need to take it as seriously as we can. And that means doing our research. And that means always thinking about how policies and platforms and perspectives that we align ourselves with, how they are affecting our fellow children of God, our fellow man. They're our neighbors. Are they hurting people? Are we justifying stuff just because it goes along with what we want? But is it hurting others in the process? Are we being like Christ? Does Christ care about the things that we care about so much? Is Christ our top? Is he the one that we are most loyal to? Or is it a political party or political leader? Maybe that's the most important question, is who is our leader? Who do we respect and love most? Who are we going to follow? Whose example is most important for us to emulate and for us to expect in the rest of our elected officials? And I would just ask everyone to please ponder these things, and please pray as you study, and the Lord will make it clear to you what it is that you are supposed to do. I hope that as Christians, we can be more loving and more accepting and reach out and try to understand different perspectives better, try to see good in all parties, try to just expand our reach in a loving, respectful, light-filled way. Thank you for listening.